Conservationists are applauding the approval of a global treaty that will bring in new protections for international waters. The agreement's been ratified by 60 countries. It's the first of its kind.
Yes, the aim of the High Seas Treaty, that's what it's called, is to safeguard marine life for an area that covers nearly half of the Earth's surface. Well, to explain the significance of this treaty, we're now joined by Eliza Northrop, Director of the UNSW Centre for Sustainable Development Reform. Eliza, great to have you on the show. You know, whenever I think of the high seas, I always think of pirates, but I'm presuming too that this international waters really, we're talking about waters that are beyond the jurisdiction of any single country. So give us a perspective of how big this is. What are we talking about here, and where would this be?
Great question, and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. So one of the stats you just gave is absolutely correct. So we're talking about the high seas, the ocean that is beyond the area that many of us would go to in our lifetime. But these areas make up about 40% of the total surface of the planet, around 65% of the total surface of the ocean. So the vast majority, when we think of the ocean, is the high seas, and kind of a staggering 95% of the ocean's volume. So a huge proportion of our marine biodiversity contained in this area, despite the fact that, most of us, unless we go on deep sea fishing trawls or shipping containers, will ever get there, but hugely significant.
Yeah, so this is an area that is vulnerable to overfishing, climate change, also the threat of deep sea mining as well. We know that 60 countries have signed up to ratify this treaty. What is expected of these 60 countries?
So currently, despite their significance in terms of the world's largest ecosystem, and as you've said, really critical for global food security, for regulating our climate, these areas are only fall within about 1% of protection. Under this new agreement, we suddenly now have the missing piece of international governance of our ocean. We have the ability to create marine protected areas, so areas where we can essentially regulate the activities that happen in areas of really critical biodiversity significance. And so the parties that have become, deposited their instrument of ratification, that have forced this agreement to now enter into force in 120 days, which is what everyone's very excited about, will be the first group of countries that really determine what this means, that start working on the detailed rules and guidance around how we are going to collectively manage and protect the biodiversity in these critical areas. So this first 60, and it's now 61 countries, are really going to be the key decision makers when the parties to the agreement first meet next year.
So I went on the High Seas Tracker website to see who's actually, signed up, and I see that 143 countries have actually signed up to this treaty. But as you say, only 61 have ratified it, and so that means that only 61 are legally bound by this treaty. Australia hasn't ratified it yet. What's the hesitancy here? Why the delay?
So Australia was one of the earliest signatories. They signed back on September 2023. Should also note that Australia is one of the co-chairs, together with Belize, of the UN preparatory committee that is working solidly this year and into next year to make sure that everything is in place for that first meeting of the parties. So Australia's been committed to this process right from the start, but the process of joining international treaties is not, it's not a quick process. In Australia in particular, it is the ability to enter into treaties is an executive power, but in Australia that involves parliamentary review. Now, this was tabled by the Albanese government in June last year. So all of the steps are currently underway, but it is working through the process. You know, there is a national interest assessment that has to be done, and just a number of sort of checks and processes. So I think everyone's expecting Australia to deposit that instrument of ratification as soon as it can.
I note that the Biden administration had signed up to the treaty. The U.S. hasn't ratified it yet, but we also see that President Donald Trump has issued an executive order allowing permits for deep sea mining in international waters. So what does it say if a powerful country like the United States may just ignore this treaty, and we don't know whether the Trump administration will ratify it? What does it say if a powerful country like that will ignore this treaty? What's the impetus for other countries to actually abide by the treaty?
So this treaty itself doesn't regulate deep sea mining. That is also falling under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is part of this, but it is sort of managed by a separate body. But I think the issues around deep sea mining and access to marine genetic resources is deeply connected to this agreement. And I think this is what parties are trying to do by rapidly causing this agreement to enter into force, is to send a really clear signal that biodiversity of these critical ecosystems and how we manage these marine genetic resources, whether they're in the water column under this agreement or on the seabed floor, matters. And these are areas of the global commons. They don't belong to any one country, and so this is a really critical area for international cooperation, of establishing sort of the rules of how we are going to interact with these really fragile and delicate ecosystems, because there is material that is of interest from a mining perspective, or for broader purposes in terms of vaccines and a lot of really important areas of scientific research in these areas.
Eliza Northrop, Director of the UNSW Centre for Sustainable Development Reform, we thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you so much.